I'm going to go to my guest, though. We are joined with the man himself that can explain the things that are taking place on the African continent, Koffi Kouakou. Koffi is an African analyst and research fellow at the Center for Africa-China Studies at the University of Johannesburg, and honestly, a good friend of the show. Koffi, I always enjoy these segments. I always feel like I learned something. How you doing, man? You doing okay?
I'm doing okay. Nice and warm, sunny down here, so can't complain in Johannesburg
Lucky
today.
you. Lucky you. It's cold out here. Actually, it's not too bad. It's not too bad. Koffi, thank you for joining me, man. I really do appreciate it. I saw somewhere, and it's a vague recollection, so correct me if I'm wrong. The French are also leaving another country. They left Chad. They were kicked out of the Sahel region. Correct me if I'm wrong. It's somewhere else, correct?
Yes, so it's Ivory Coast. It didn't make that much noise, but in fact, many Pan-Africanists believe it's a ruse. It's not enough. It's just leaving. They left us with 600 soldiers, troops. And people are saying, well, it's not enough. You need to do it the way Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, and especially Chad have done it. Then we can believe that the French have really retreated. In fact, it's true because Ivory Coast is like the jewel with Senegal in the neo-colonial possession of France, especially economically.
600 troops. It's like, okay, leaving in quotes. Let's put it leaving in quotes.
Yeah.
You sent me several stories, and all of these stories are
Yes.
fantastic.
Mm.
And I actually effectively, hey, what excites you? And to be transparent with my audience, when I bring on guests, I realize that all of these people are involved into something, and that there would be things that would excite them. And the things that excite them may be more interesting than the things that I'm thinking about, right? And so, especially since this is their subject matter. And so, the first story you sent was Qatar and Africa. Now, Qatar, I should say, wills a lot of, let's say, financial might across the continent. Um, how does this translate into control in regards to African states? But you pointed out that they have a lot of influence in African affairs.
Yeah. Well, they've used their money very well. So small country, about 11,000 and so square kilometers, which is close to half of the size of the Kruger National Park in South Africa, right?
Mhm.
But they've managed to really use their money well enough so that they can even compete at international level with all sorts of other countries. I mean, this is extraordinary. So what they're attempting to do is to fill the sort of the gap that's been the geopolitical gap that's been left by the United States, Russia, China, and others in India. And they've tried their best because, West African themselves haven't been successful enough. And if you were to take, the Democratic Republic of Congo itself, it's about 2 million and something square kilometers. It's a vast country. So you would think that at least they could sort their own problem. As we said in Africa, there's something the UN and then the African Union also use that African solution for African problems. But
Mhm.
what this Qatar sheikh, I was telling a friend of mine, it's a little bit, it's not derogatory, but I said, a man, a sheikh in sandals, summons African presidents and tell them what to do. I mean, you can see the picture. He's in sandals, and both the other African guys are so overly dressed, and they don't even think about it. Jamal.
Wait. You know
It's
what's
a guy
funny
who's
about
gonna.
that? You know
Yeah.
what's funny about that? It's not just Africans. If you remember when Joe Biden sent Blinken, I believe, to Saudi
Yeah.
Arabia,
Mm.
and MBS was sitting out in sandals in the pool, was yelling at Blinken. It's like they got to an argument. He was yelling at Blinken, right? So
Yeah.
it's not just Africans; it's also Americans. What they do with
Yes.
this stuff.
So they're filling that geopolitical gap, which is very
Right.
important, but at least they're trying something because the East African community hasn't managed to do it. Same as the Southern African Development Community, with President Ramaphosa, Namibia, Botswana, Zimbabwe, Zambia, and all of these, they haven't been able to sort it out. So in fact, they're pulled out. In fact, the Southern African troops have been pulled out of the Eastern Congo.
Mhm.
And at the last meeting, they managed to ask five former African presidents, I say, to now help to negotiate and bring about peace in that region. And many of us know that it's not going to happen because
Really?
of
You
the
don't think so?
forces, the external forces that are at play. It's not going to happen. It's so big. Something's going to have to give. There's a great deal of worry about the fact that potentially the Democratic Republic of Congo might break apart like Sudan did way back. And
Why do
people are
you?
very worried.
But real quick, I'm sorry to interrupt. I'm interrupting because I'm trying to understand. That's the only reason. Why do you think that it won't happen? Like you make the point of saying there are so many external forces that are involved, and you're bringing this up in the context of Qatar.
Yeah, I mean, remember, Qatar is same as all the Gulf region countries love African minerals, and especially two in particular, gold and diamonds. And where else can you find them cheap enough without having to deal with the Kimberley, requirements for diamonds and then the gold issues and so forth?
Mhm.
They love gold, same as you go to Dubai. I mean, Dubai today is the number one hub for gold trading in the world. Of course, Israel is on diamonds. London is both gold and diamonds, and then New York as well, same as Amsterdam, so diamond. But these are, I mean, the Middle East today, or what people are now calling West Asia, is a huge hub for all these trafficking that gets to them. And they have to do something because they're getting much of their gold from there, illegal mining, small miners, and so forth. And they've already invested, in fact, especially in West Africa, where one of the things they do is they tend to invest with the ideological religious background. So they'll,
Mhm.
for example, build mosques, And yeah, the other shock was just a quick information. Qatar, I think it was, no, Saudi Arabia asked President Ibrahim Traore of Burkina Faso, look, I want to build 200 mosques in your country, and I'm gonna not only fund that, but one of the requirements for me to help you with funds is to have those 200 mosques built. And President Ibrahim Traore said, no, thank you.
No.
You can keep your money.
Yeah. I mean, they're spreading Wahhabism around. Like this was the Hillary Clinton thing, right? Hillary Clinton was getting a bunch of money from Saudi Arabia. And
Yeah.
WikiLeaks published a document pointing out that Hillary Clinton knew Saudi Arabia was spreading
Mm,
jihadists, like using their
mm,
mosque as a way of doing so. So they build a
yeah.
mosque, they pay kids, people, all that stuff, people who are already poor. Those people would get radicalized in the context of those mosques, and at that point have this kind of allegiance to Saudi Arabia. Like it's very strange, but that's what they've been doing across the Middle East. I don't blame them for saying no.
Yeah, yeah, no, but what you're saying is true. What they're doing is buying influence. I mean,
Yeah.
remember they've been buying influence from in the United States, in Europe for many, many years. I mean, how did these countries, Qatar, got the World Cup, football, FIFA World Cup? Everybody knows they have a very, big pockets with a lot of money and they buy off people very quickly. And buying that influence comes also with all sorts of opportunities. And I think this is what Qatar is seeing to fill that void and sneaking into that thing in the crisis in the eastern part of the Democratic Republic of the
Congo.
Congo. And people will see that as a good thing because at least they're trying to do something, although it didn't succeed much, but they're still trying to do something. And that was the point I was
But
making.
you're
Qatar
saying they're
making a move.
trying to either break it up. I mean, because you're saying foreign influence, and you're saying foreign influence is preventing the Democratic Republic of Congo from, let's say, resolving the conflict. And in fact,
Yeah.
On some level, it sounds like you're saying that there are forces that are trying to split it because they want access to the mineral wealth in the DRC.
Yes. I mean, not all of them, for example, want to see the DRC split. Some are playing both games. If it's split, if not split, they know they're going to make money anyway. They're still going to, get the minerals. And Qatar is playing the peaceful right now, sort of a good cop at this stage. And they have a point. You need peace in that region. The extent to which is true and deep enough and sincere is what we have to question.
Interesting. Do you think they're being sincere? Because look, I will tell you, I've gotten very cynical about politics. The Ukraine war has radicalized me on this stuff. Um, I don't think life matters. I mean, I think it matters, but I don't think world leaders think it matters. I think they play to their own ends. Basically, what can I get out of this, even if there's a war? Because in my mind, it's like, well, we should stop a war because we should stop a war. We shouldn't have people killing each other. That's not the way they think, though. And to your point, there are forces, I would imagine, that would be perfectly okay with the DRC splitting because they believe they can get, let's say, ends with the new government, especially since it's probably going to be a weak government considering it's just split. Like, where's, give me your thoughts on the
Well,
chances for
what I would
reunification.
say is I would use your term, and the term I also uses sincerity, is really a sincere transactional mood. They're trying to, it doesn't matter whichever way this thing goes, if it's peaceful or not peaceful, either way, they're making a transaction because they need to sort of, influence the players on the ground,
Mhm.
the locals first, the president, and then of course they also have access to the most powerful countries in the world, and then not just countries but also international companies that are exploiting these minerals. That is very important, and this is where I would say it's a transactional sincerity. But the rest, I mean, what do they care? I mean, there have been more than 10 million people who've been killed in the eastern part of the Congo, and it's still ongoing. The fight is displaced more than I think 7 or 8 or 6 million people still roaming around trying to figure out where do they go next. So
Wow.
if they were really interested in this, they would have probably done something about it a long time ago. So I think the sincerity is more transactional than anything else.
What are the chances of them bringing us so close? And by the way, this is invisible in our media. Like, we don't, like the idea that 10 million people vanished off the face of the earth. And it's very rarely spoken about here. So forgive me for not uh, being more versed on this. And so I appreciate you kind of filling us in on it. You said multiple presidents are coming together in order to try to, I guess, come up with a resolution for it. What are their chances?
I think the chances are very limited. There's a lot of talks. I mean, you have President Obasanjo, all of them former president, one from Kenya, I think the other one from Tanzania. But about five of them, I can't remember the whole list. But these were presidents who were there before. And there's
Mhm.
a hope. I mean, hope is not quite the thing. It's like in strategy, if you hope for something, you may not get it. You got to be into the action. And these
Yeah.
people are retired. They're going to be roaming around, they're going to flying around first class. And the budget of the European Union, it's not even the African Union because the African Union doesn't have money, as you know, as we talked about it last time. So
Yeah.
all these movements are being funded from outside. So the hope that something is going to happen, and then mark my word, I'll be very surprised to see that there's peace in that region because of the nature. It's such a high, very tough area to police because of the nature of the resources there. There's so I mean the resource level is just the wealth there is unbelievable. Who's going to let this go so easily? And even if there were peace, how do you do that? Even among the the Congolese themselves from the Democratic Republic of Congo, they don't get along, you know. And that's the difficult thing. So I'm not really confident that any peaceful solution will take place in the next year or two, but perhaps maybe the next 5 or 6 years when people are just realizing that they need to get together instead of fighting for the resource. There's enough for everybody, not only for the Congolese and the Rwandese or the Ugandans or anybody else, but the rest of the world. For Apple, for Samsung,
Yeah.
for for
You
Huawei, all of
you
this. There's
said,
plenty of that for everybody.
did I hear you right? You said 5 years. You think they're going to be fighting for 5 more years?
Yes, yes, they're entrenched. I mean, the M23 movement, rebel movement in the Eastern Congo, which is basically supported by Rwanda, is really digging up the roots. They've occupied Goma and then many other big cities or towns in that region. And they're not letting this go so easily unless they're routed out by a solid force. Um, the peace process or whatever it's called, peace, is not going to take place.
And the DRC doesn't have the military capability to
Of
just.
course, it doesn't. It doesn't. Government soldiers are being killed all the time in that region, and that's one
Wow.
of the reasons the M23 has managed to establish itself as a force to be reckoned with.
Wow. This is so, see, this is so different than the US government. The US government has a strong central government,
Yeah.
police, military, etc. Like it's emphatic. We will kill you if you try
Oh,
to do anything.
yes.
That is amazing. Wow. That is
Mm.
disheartening to hear. The idea that this war that has already killed 10 million people is going to rumble on 10 more years for 5 more years is just
Yes.
unfortunate, to put it mildly. How did this start, by the way?
You mean the war in the Eastern Congo?
Yep.
Remember, even if you took, you got to go back all the way to the 1940s. If you remember historically, when the US was looking for fissile material to make the bomb, they realized that the Congo, Belgian Congo, run by Belgium, with the king there, with the sort of search, they found that Congo had some of the best high quality level of enrichment of uranium. So they asked the Belgian government to seal the place. So the U.S. got people, military and soldiers, to seal the place. And in fact, it is known that Einstein sent a letter after he learned about that
FDR.
good quality of uranium in the Congo. Because remember, the uranium in the Congo that was really used to explode in Nagasaki and in Hiroshima.
Right.
So in fact, those two cities have a sort of twin city partnership with Congo, by the way. But anyway, so Einstein sent a message to President, I think, Roosevelt,
FDR.
saying, hey, please make sure this, I'm going to use a derogatory term, but make sure those niggers don't control the uranium. We want that for us. Yes, the letter is out there. You can read it. But he didn't say that directly, I'm just paraphrasing a bit. So that started from there. And then, of course, the culmination is that in the 60s, when Patrice Lumumba, one of the independence leaders, was trying very hard to free the Congo from the shackles of the West, he got killed. And from there on, there have been wars among themselves. I mean, President Mobutu Sese Seko, who was there, who had Patrice Lumumba killed, who was the sort of manager of that assassination, remained in power for more than 3 decades. And the wars continues. Even under Mobutu, there was still some sort of some fighting, but not as big, until he was taken out of power with the help of the United States, Europeans pushing Rwanda and Uganda to kick him out of there. And ever since, there have been more trouble, in fact, than before. And it's been continuing ever since. That's a brief history. There's a lot more, but that's a brief history.
I'm a firm believer of leaving countries alone. Because in my mind, you can't make it better. Like it's like if you touch it, you break it. As soon as you touch it, you break it. It just always gets worse. And it's like countries, if you leave them to their devices, will evolve into something.
Yeah.
And it's
Yes.
usually better, right? But if you
Mm.
touch it, you break it. Every instance that like, I can look at the Middle East, I can look at South America, I can look at Iran, like, effectively us putting in the Shah and the effect that that had on changing the contours of Iran into this kind of religious monarchy or religious democracy, whatever they want to call it. They call themselves a democracy, but whatever.
The mullahs.
I'm making the point. You touch it, you break it. And I think the Congo is a good example. Man, oh man, that sucks. Like, I just hate these wars. And and I know we use the term war, but killing, starvation, illness, et cetera, just misery.
Yeah.
The other story you mentioned, the triumphant homecoming to the South African ambassador. Oh, that's too funny. And you know what?
Yeah.
This goes into the whole Musk coming out saying there's a white genocide taking place. And I think it was Ramaphosa just kind of blew it. Dude, that's not happening. They're just making this up. I am fascinated by the white genocide thing. Uh,
Yeah.
where is this? I know where it's coming from. Please
Mm.
explain to the audience where it's coming from and what they're trying to call a white genocide. Mind you, as they back a literal genocide in Israel, no less. What are they calling a white genocide? Why are they using this terminology and this phraseology?
Well, I mean, remember, it's a nice dog whistling. It sort of goes counterpoint, but it just has resonance in places where white people feel, oh my goodness, this is really true. These people are against us. And it looks like on the other side, they look darker than us. So it's easier to justify, right? You can flip that script. And if you have, for example, this week again, Malema, the head of the leader of the Economic Freedom Fighters, the political party here in South Africa, is
Mhm.
now there's a famous but also terrible song that say "Kill the Boer" song. It's called. So that really shakes white people up, and in fact it should, because it sends a signal that many of them are not welcome. But he does that to sort of rebuttal and then attempt to crack the shell of the racist and people who just don't want to give in, to open up and be a bit more inclusive about the wealth of this country, distribute
Right.
land, make sure people have these things. So it's a way to get the debate going. But of course, it's used very cleverly to say, didn't we tell you? Here's what they're saying. They don't want us here. They're against us. This is a form of racism. This is a form of also Black supremacist way of pushing the narrative against whites and trying to drive them into the sea. And that resonates very well, not just in South Africa, small French here, but in the US. I mean, the right-wing people love these kind of things. So
Yeah.
why? We told you so. Here they are. They're coming, with the spears and whatever it is they want to kill us.
With spears. It's wild. I find a kinship with the Africans in South Africa, kind of, even though maybe I shouldn't. And the reason why I say that is the United States, slavery, Jim Crow, had all that stuff. And you can make an argument that Jim Crow is just apartheid, right? You're splitting up a certain section of the country. And I know in the United States case, Africans were a minority. In South Africa, Africans are a majority.
Yeah.
But we experience very similar things. Like, so the majority of the wealth in the United States is held by whites. I think it was like blacks average 14,000, whites average like 110,000, just a ridiculous skew. And it's directly related to slavery. And so in the country, they're like, okay, well, we have to do something to make up for slavery and Jim Crow. So we will have affirmative action, meaning we will create a system that incentivizes people to hire blacks at a time where they
That's
weren't
right.
trying to hire blacks.
Yeah.
And of course, now you get that's racist because you're taking advantage and you're forcing black people into the thing. And it's like,
Yeah,
but
you
you
remind
had
me of something. You remind me of something that in South Africa it should be the other way around. Say blacks should be hiring whites. You see what I mean? So we should be, and they should be happy to know that DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion, is good for them, because then we can put them into the the fold of the majority. But of course, strangely, they don't like that.
I guess my thing is
This,
like they act as if history never happened, and it
no,
feels like that
they
way in
blink
South
out at
Africa.
anything. Yeah. So I think that the resonant for them, they use it as a dog whistle, a good race bait, which works well because people are looking at this. Oh yeah, that's true. They're discriminating against whites because they now have laws that say, okay, if you create a company, you got to make sure that you get 10% or 15% or maybe 30% of blacks to come and join you. They think it's just not right to do that. You see. And so, but it's a law in South Africa. That's one of the reasons Elon Musk has been really angry at South Africa. In fact, I was talking about that to Rick Chance's show yesterday, that Elon Musk is unhappy because he wanted to bring Starlink to South Africa. And the laws of the country say if you're an investor from outside, you're coming in, you got to relinquish 30% of your company's shares to a South African, black or white. However, you need to, if it's a white person, you need to make sure that there are a lot more black people also benefiting from that in the company. You see,
Mhm.
but we know that this law and this opportunity has been hijacked by many black elites who have pocketed the 30% without distributing it correctly across the board. And that also, it's something that's really not quite right. But overall, it's a very good way to try to help people. But like all things, they're going to be hijacked. I mean,
Yeah.
even the Doge thing in the US, as much as we think it's a great thing, somebody's going to hijack it for something else very
I don't
soon.
think, dude, I don't think it's a great thing. Because it's kind of like they name stuff and it does the opposite of what they call it. Leave no child behind.
Yeah.
Okay, you're leaving kids behind, right? Like
Mm.
Elon Musk is the richest man on the planet. He has like $500 billion, some insane amount of money. He's
Yeah.
like going to be like
400 billion. 400 billion.
yeah, some insane amount of money. He
Yeah.
is using that program to fire poor people, like meaning the people who work in a government job aren't balling. They might be making
Yeah.
50K a year. And Elon
Mm.
Musk decided to destroy Social Security, destroy Medicare, destroy Medicaid, fire tens of thousands of people who are just making a basic wage as the world's richest man under the notion of this is waste, fraud, and abuse. And it's like, okay, this is crazy. Like Elon Musk has no experience with Social Security to be able to fire anybody. And
Yeah.
apparently, the Social Security system crashed multiple times over the course of the last week as a
Yeah.
result of what Musk has been doing. So it's like, yeah, it's good to get rid of waste, fraud, and abuse. Do I believe that the world's richest man, who loves the fact that he's close to power, has any experience doing that
Yeah.
for governmental
Yeah.
systems?
So at this stage, he's wielding two types of powers. The one is about money power, and the other one is political power. I mean,
Yes.
unbelievable. We've never seen this. But back to your question about the triumphant return of the South African expelled
Okay.
South African ambassadors. Let me sort of quote a couple of things. He came, I mean, at the airport in Cape Town. I mean, there was a huge crowd coming for him, and he hadn't even written his report back to office report to the president, and he had a megaphone, and he was just blaring it out. He was careful, but you could see that it was a master stroke. So, and the next day, guess what? He published a powerful piece of work. And let me share with you a couple of things, especially around diplomacy. And
Yep.
he says, I'm just going to read them very quickly for you. Diplomacy is not the art of lying, but it is the art of telling the truth gently and constructively. Diplomacy is not flattery or denial, but it is persuasion based on intellectual honesty and integrity. Diplomacy is not abandoning your core values, but it is about and universalizing them for a better world. And finally, it says here, diplomacy is not sacrificing your interests, but it is about pursuing them with dignity. But most important, let me read you the beginning of that piece. Very powerful, Jamal. And he says, when he opens up, and a very smart guy, he brings the name of his wife first. He said, Rosita and I arrived here today makes it human, having again been honored by our country to represent its values that are inflation in its stand for truth, justice, and the equality of all people. And finally, let me read that last sentence. It says, "We are indeed moved by this warm welcome after the bewildering reaction of being declared persona non grata for intellectual and political and analyzing your host country and preparing your own country for radically new terms of engagement." And he says he's proud to wear the badge of honor of persona non grata.
Wow.
But of
What does
course,
he,
the president cannot speak like that. That's for sure, because the president say, "Hey, hey, wait a minute, come down here, people. I'm diplomatic." And this is a powerful piece. Yeah.
what is South Africa expecting coming from the United States? I mean, there is like verbal stuff that, like I say, Elon Musk is putting out. Technically, Elon Musk is not part of the government, though. He's some quasi something that Trump has just kind of fixed himself. What is
He's
South Africa
an
expecting?
elected. Well, look, I think what's my observation really gathers that these are trying times, and we're not close to have something sorted out very quickly. And South Africa should be bracing for more tension to go for the next 4 years, that's for sure. And in fact, we just heard yesterday that President Trump has already nominated one person to be the new ambassador. Well, it's got to go through Senate first. A sort of right wing, media guy called Leo Brent Bozell III. I'm sure you've heard about him. He
Okay.
used to run American Media, something consortium or council. And he's a very staunch right wing person. He's qualified, in fact, Nelson Mandela as a terrorist and the African National Congress as a group of terrorists. So that may not go well. However, because he's probably assuming a diplomatic position now, there's hope that perhaps he'll have a different way of pushing the narrative. He might not make it easier for South Africa, but he may have a behavior that could be maybe conciliatory or peace in a peaceful manner. But there's no assurance that's going to happen.
Typically, people are policy. The person who they put in a particular position gives some kind of context
Mm.
to the thinking of the principal in that regard. That is not a good sign that they are sending somebody who seems to be okay with apartheid to a former apartheid state. That's a little disturbing to me.
Yes, yes, it is.
What
So
is
South Africa is going to be, it's going to be a long haul for South Africa. But I think what's going to come out as a success is that you need great diplomats like Foreign Minister Lavrov of Russia, but also Jay Shankar of India. All these people, I think South Africa can learn from them. We have a new foreign minister that's quite young, so he doesn't have the depth of most of these people. And I can tell you, Trump's not going to even cuddle with him. He's just going to dismiss him. And so far, South Africa hasn't had even a chance of space to have a face-to-face meeting with President Trump. It's a bit early, I must say. I mean, 2 months it's a bit early, I must say. But
is
at
that what
least
is that what South
the
Africa wants? I mean, Trump seems to be taking a certain tact based upon the people who are around him in regards to South Africa. Is it better to, I don't know, brave the storm? Is it better to kind of, I don't know, give me your take on that. I mean, like, it's a conversation, meaning, I guess, and the reason why I'm asking this is, what does South Africa expect from Trump? And should they expect anything from Trump? Like, it's a little bit weird to me. Look, look, I'm an American, right? We don't have, there are no states where America is like, with the exception of Russia, and that's because we're losing the war. But usually it's not, we need to meet with somebody. It seems to be the other way around where other countries want to meet with Trump. What does South Africa want to get out of Trump in this? And what does South Africa expect from Trump in any kind of meeting?
look, there are many aspects to it, but for me, I see that in the value chain of this relationship, there are two things that are important, right? Power is also important. South Africa is not as powerful as the United States, but South Africa has exercised power in the way with the sort of with a very powerful moral complexity that South Africa has weaved itself around the International Court of Justice genocide case against Israel. South
Right.
Africa has really elevated the moral power, and this, the US and Israel cannot really match it. And there's a gap there. They're struggling to fill that gap. And they have a natural brutal response to it. We're going to punish South Africa. And I think that is their discourse. That is their strategy, basically. And in fact, we're not quite sure yet where is the Trump Africa strategy is, because we know during the Blinken era in July 2022, Anthony Blinken was here in Johannesburg in Pretoria, sorry, launching the US Africa strategy, but that's dead in the water. And I don't think the Trump administration will even look at it. However, with the new signs and the events that are taking place, there's great sense of worry about what will be the US Africa strategy going forward. But at the heart of it, South Africa is also asking itself a serious question. What is now, how is South Africa, the US dealing with South Africa? And so far, it's a tense thing. It's going to be a power relations. The US is trying all kinds of pull, from expropriation acts, attacking it, to racist rants, and then also using all kind of, other issues. But they're not getting there. And we all know what it is about. It's just about punishing South Africa because of the ICJ genocide case against Israel, period. The second one is also the fight against the rising BRICS nations. And South Africa is one of the weakest links, I believe, for me, given the kind of vulnerabilities we have at home. The economy hasn't grown very much for the past 15 years. We're not even at 1%. The projection is probably 1.3 for next year or this whole year, but it's not going to happen. We know it. Electricity problems, there's social cohesion that's not quite right between black and white, and Trump is using it. He's attacking that and he's splitting people, black and whites. Although there's still a fringe of whites who are sort of very separated, but it seems like some white people are talking into a very strange language. Yes, you need to pay attention to the United States. You have to be diplomatic. They're couching most of their feelings. Many of them it doesn't matter who runs the US. That's it. If Trump says this today and it changes the tune, they're going to agree on both sides. So they already have taken side, and their agent, the US agent in South Africa, also working very hard, and they've been helped by the elite media, which just has a discourse sometimes that's just so disappointing, but they're doing their best. This is the one part. The other part is that South Africa is generally not as powerful as the US.
Yeah.
Right? So South Africa has to be somehow diplomatic in most of the things she does. But South Africa has been warned. If you keep begging and bowing your back, the boot's going to come on your head like they did for Syria or Iran, for anybody else, or Iraq. So be very careful. Fix your home. Put order in your home. If you put your house in order, you're most likely to face them. If you have a good economy, and employment is going to reduce, poverty also reduce. All these things, fix them, and these are the vulnerabilities that I'm very worried about, and I think other people are also worried about. That makes South Africa a weak link within the BRICS.
Wow. So, wow. I mean, I guess my question would be, how would Trump do anything to South Africa in the context of BRICS? Like, let's accept for the moment that South Africa is the weak link in the BRICS chain. How would they use that in order to undermine or to somehow damage BRICS? And this could be the last question. Because you're right, Trump has put a target around BRICS. He considers it a threat on some level. How do you see that happening, where South Africa is used as let's say, as a way to damage the BRICS relationship?
Well, I mean, very simple, Jamal. If you have a community and one of the members are consistently or constantly under attack by somebody else. And the other BRICS are just talking. Oh yeah, we support South Africa. They're not coming. If the US wanted to invade South Africa today, I have no clear evidence that China, Russia, India, or Iran will be sending boots on the ground to save South Africa.
They'll complain.
No ways. You see what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm just not speculating. This is the truth. The
Yeah.
US has a base in Botswana, right up north, a very special base. They can beef it up. In fact, Marco Rubio last week was there. And there's a lot of talks also about secession of the Western Cape province, one of the 9 provinces.
Really?
Yes. And all these right wings are saying we need the support from the US to secede from South Africa because we want to be on our own. And in fact, one of the movement people said, you know, we want to turn Cape Town, we want Cape Town to be like Tel Aviv.
Oh. Oh, that's horrendous.
So there are all these signs, as much as they look like benign, and the more you dismiss these signs, the more you find yourself into trouble, because that's how people build fringe movements, build very slowly, and they're very powerfully convincing because they have a narrative that most media will buy into very quickly.
Koffi, man, like I said, I'm always enlightened by these conversations, and I appreciate it because we often don't get this in our media here. Koffi Kouakou, he is an African analyst, senior research fellow at the Center for Africa-China Studies at the University of Johannesburg. My man, be safe.
Thanks very much. Thanks for having me, Jamal. All the best.
Oh, always,